Welcome to The Explainer. We're about to dive into something really deep today. It's one of the most powerful phrases from ancient Indian philosophy. Just three little words that open up a huge question about who or what you really are. No, seriously, just take a second and think about that. Are you just this tiny separate drop in a massive ocean? Or are you somehow the entire ocean contained in that one drop? It's a huge question, right? Well, today, we're going to unpack a short, ancient phrase that has been the starting point for centuries of debate on exactly this. So, yeah, let's get into it. All right, so to understand this, our story doesn't start in some dusty old library. Nope, it starts with a family. A story from the ancient Chandogya Upanishad. We've got this young guy, Svetaketu, and he's just come home after spending 12 That's right, 12 long years studying at a gurukula, a traditional kind of boarding school. And this kid, he thinks he's the smartest guy in the room. He's learned all the sacred texts, he can quote anything you want, and let's be honest, he's become kinda arrogant, super proud. But his dad, Uddalaka, who happens to be this incredibly wise sage, he takes one look at his son and sees right through it all. He sees a head full of knowledge, but not an ounce of real wisdom.
So the father decides to test him. He throws out this challenge. He's like, "Son, with all that learning, did they teach you the one thing, the one single teaching that unlocks everything else, the master key to all knowledge?" And Svetaketu, for all his book smarts, is just stumped. He's got nothing. He basically has to admit, I guess my teachers didn't know about that one.
And that's when the real lesson begins. The father takes over. But instead of more books, he uses these beautiful, simple examples from nature. He'll say, look at how bees take nectar from all these different flowers, but it all becomes one honey. Or, see how this tiny bit of salt just dissolves and becomes the water? He's using these everyday things to point to this invisible, subtle essence that connects absolutely everything. So he goes through 9 of these examples, building this idea piece by piece. And then he gets to the grand finale, the absolute peak of the lesson. He takes this massive, profound truth about the very fabric of reality and boils it down to one single powerful sentence. A sentence he says to his son again and again and again. He looks at him and says, Tat Tvam Asi, which means that thou art. Or in more modern English, you are that. So let's break that down real quick. Tat, that's that. It means the ultimate universal reality, the source of everything, what they call Brahman. Tvam, that's you, your individual self, your soul, your Atman. And Asi just means are. So put it all together. You are that.
Okay, seems pretty straightforward, doesn't it? You are that. But this is where the story explodes. Because what exactly that sentence means, well, that became a philosophical battleground. It literally spawned 3 major and totally different schools of thought, all from 3 little words.
So let's get into it. Let's look at how these 3 schools took the exact same phrase and ended up in completely different places when it comes to who you are, what God is, and how it all fits together. All right, first up we have Advaita Vedanta. You can think of this as non-dualism, and its biggest champion was the philosopher Adi Shankaracharya, way back in the 8th century. So the Advaita school, they take Tat Tvam Asi at its most literal, absolute value. For them, it means your individual soul, your Atman, is not just like Brahman, it is Brahman, 100% identical, no daylight between them. You're not a part of it, you're not a reflection of it, you are it. Your individual consciousness is the one universal consciousness. Full stop. Okay, but then a few hundred years go by, and another great philosopher, Ramanujacharya, comes along and says, hold on a second, I see it differently. And his school of thought is called Vishishtadvaita, or you could call it qualified non-dualism. So, for Ramanuja, you are that doesn't mean you're identical to everything. It means you are an inseparable part of everything. Think of it like a wave on the ocean. The wave is absolutely made of ocean water, right? It can't exist without the ocean. But the wave itself is not the entire ocean. See the difference? So you are distinct, you have your own self, but you are eternally connected to and part of that greater whole. And then, just when you think you've got the options figured out, we get to the most radical, most surprising interpretation of all. This one comes from a 13th century philosopher named Madhvacharya, and his school is called Advaita, which means dualism. Okay, get this. This is just brilliant.
Madhvacharya looks at the original Sanskrit text and basically says, you've all been reading it wrong. He points out that based on the rules of Sanskrit grammar, how words can blend together, a tiny letter a at the beginning of a word probably got dropped over time. So he argued the original phrase wasn't actually Tat Tvam Asi. It was Sa Atma Atuptam Asi. And what does that little a do? It completely flips the entire meaning on its head. It turns the phrase into Atatvam Asi, which means you are not that. Wow. So in this dualist view, you, the individual soul, and God, the ultimate reality, are completely, fundamentally, and eternally separate things. The goal isn't to realize you're identical, it's to have a relationship of devotion with something separate from you.
Okay, let's just pause and take that in because it's absolutely wild. You have one simple phrase, Tat Tvam Asi, and you get three totally conflicting interpretations. One says, you are the whole thing. The second says you are a part of the whole thing. And the third says you are not the whole thing, all from the exact same words. Incredible. So the obvious question, right? Which one is it? Who's right? Did Shankara get it right and the other two get it wrong? Well, the answer might be a little more profound than just picking a side in a debate. A more modern way to look at this is that maybe they aren't competing truths at all. Maybe they're just different paths designed for different kinds of people, you know? Some of us are naturally drawn to this idea of total oneness. Others need that feeling of a personal relationship with something greater. And for some, the path of devotion to a separate being is what resonates. Maybe each one is just a valid way to get to the same ultimate destination. And you know, maybe that's the real genius of Tat Tvam Asi. Maybe its true value isn't in giving us a neat and tidy answer. Maybe its power lies in forcing us to ask the question in the first place, one of the biggest questions we can possibly ask. It's the spark that has lit a fire of contemplation for thousands of years. So in the end, Tat Tvam Asi doesn't give you a destination on a map. It just hands you a compass and an invitation. It points right back at you and says, go find out for yourself. Look deeper. Because maybe the search for that answer, maybe that is the whole point.